Hi, my name's Phil. I like talking about politics, and in this video I'd like to discuss the latest strategic error from the Tories as the Health Secretary appears to insult junior doctors, which is allowing NHS strikes to continue for over a year when healthcare is one of the top issues for voters and be relatively simple to deal with it. But first, if you'd like to be notified of daily news and politics, please subscribe to the channel. So I have been used throughout my life to seeing the Tories stoking what we now call culture wars, but in reality is just good old-fashioned divide and rule. It's as old as politics itself. You make an enemy of some group which is not valuable to you and which cannot harm you in order to attract those who are valuable to you to your banner. In fact, I seem to recall a bit of a saying, some ancient proverb from somewhere. If you want to see the real measure of a person, observe how they behave with someone who does not threaten them and can do nothing for them. With these people, the Tories consistently demonise them. They demonise various minority groups, but recently they've had to expand their enemies of the people tag. Now they demonise lawyers and judges, the RSPB, even the National Trust. They're also demonising doctors. Now, can you imagine going back, say, 10 years and a Tory strategist being asked by a Tory MP, "Oh, do you think it would be a good idea if I demonised doctors?" They would look at you as if you just farted. Yet that is what they're now doing. I had wondered if the appointment of a new health secretary, Victoria Prentice, the fifth in 2 years, would wipe the slate clean and after a year of unnecessary acrimony, get a mutually agreeable settlement with NHS doctors. But no, Prentice was being interviewed today and referred to junior doctors and then said, "or doctors in training as I prefer to call them." I must just mention that my favourite retort, which came from West Country Voices, was "convicts in waiting as we prefer to call you." Now, it's worth adding that Victoria Prentice has tried to justify her use of the term later. She said, well, actually, this is a term used by the British Medical Association as well, which seems to be backed up. However, I am just going to point to her specific words here. She said, quote, I'm not changing anything here, "junior doctors or doctors in training as I prefer to call them." She didn't say junior doctors or doctors in training as they are also known. She didn't just say doctors in training. What do you mean by that? Oh, I mean junior doctors. The BMA call them doctors in training as well sometimes. No. She has said doctors in training as I prefer to call them. At that point, she's making it clear that she is using the term because she wants to use the term. She's not using it because others do. And because she didn't just say doctors in training, but she said she used the more familiar to the public line, junior doctors, then added doctors in training as I prefer to call them. Like, what's that extra clause for? Why don't you just say junior doctors? Everyone knows what a junior doctor is, right? She said it to make a point. This isn't a case of there being multiple ways to describe doctors and she just happened to pick an unfamiliar one. She made the point of using the familiar term, then the unfamiliar term, and then saying she preferred the unfamiliar term. And you think, so what could that reason be? Other than trying to suggest that, well, of course they deserve less money than someone serving coffee in Costa because they're in training, like they're an apprentice. It's like, no, they're not an apprentice. They're a fully qualified doctor. They spent 6 years qualifying as a doctor, and they may have 10 years experience in medical practice. In fact, given that they've had to spend 6 years in training to fully qualify as a doctor, and they have to spend at least 6 years as a junior doctor, or doctor in training as you prefer to call them, they have spent more time in like medical school and then in medical practice than she has as an MP, I think. Certainly as a minister, she's more experienced than she is. But beyond the instant reaction to Prentice deciding to insult doctors, it's strategically foolish. Healthcare is the second most important issue for voters in general, with the economy being first. For Conservative voters, they rate immigration higher, but that's because they've been pushing it so much. And the problems with the NHS, they actually tick both boxes here in terms of healthcare and economy, because anyone who understands anything about economics knows that you need an effective healthcare system for an economy to thrive. You need other things as well, but you need a healthcare system. And it's like, yes, the Tories want to charge their workforce as much as possible for that healthcare to maximise profits for themselves and their mates. But any Tories who understand the economy do understand you need the system. However you have that system implemented, you need it. The longer it takes for workers to be diagnosed and treated, the lower their productivity. A good healthcare system is a huge boost to an economy because it gets injured or ill workers back up to full productivity more quickly. A healthcare system that's allowed to fall apart is a drag on the economy, though. And this is understood on the left and the right because it's so clear. The reason the right favour privatisation is, first of all, some of them own private practices and want to make more money. But even for the rest of them, they just want to squeeze, they basically want slaves. So they want to squeeze as much money as they can out of the workforce. But they both understand that you need that healthcare system. You know, the difference is purely in terms of how you allow workers to access that healthcare. But this strategy of demonising junior doctors, and that's what she's done. That is, despite her spurious justification, that is what she's done. It works against the Tories because voters aren't going to blame doctors for wanting more money than someone who serves coffee. Labour have been throwing out a couple of interesting ads of late. And I mean of late, I mean this week, related to the NHS. The first one is like a mocked up Google search with questions. Why are NHS waiting times so high? Why can't I get a GP appointment? Why can't I get an NHS dentist appointment? Why am I waiting so long for mental health support? Why does cancer diagnosis take so long? Then it says, who has been in power for the last 13 years? That's going to be fairly hard hitting, I think, especially when combined with this, the sort of ad I have for years called on Labour to use more. Simple chart. It's images like this that just destroy the Tories' credibility with the NHS. It's brilliant in so many ways. It shows that the problems with the NHS, they're not just COVID or the doctors' strikes, only just happened. It's a problem where you have Tories in power. And oh, look, what happens when Labour are in power? And what is Rishi Sunak doing right now? He's feeding Labour's narrative. Labour insists that waiting lists go up under the Tories, not just recently. It went up in the 90s under the Tories, came down under Labour, went up in the 2010s and so on and forever after under the Tories. They've got documentary proof. Nice and easy to see in a chart. Sunak needs to counter that narrative by getting waiting lists to go down on his watch. Yet what's he actually doing? First, the Health Secretary is refusing to meet with striking doctors. You've got a strike on action. Oh, will you meet with the representatives? No, I'm not going to do that. Well, you don't want the strike to end then, do you? Instead, she goes on television to insult them. This means that she's got zero chance of getting doctors to agree anything less than reasonable terms in return for better consideration later on. She's not giving them the opportunity to give her the benefit of the doubt that she's got their interests at heart, because she's made it quite clear she doesn't care about them. In fact, she actually wants to attack them. Second, because NHS strikes in one form or other have been going on for over a year, the waiting lists continue to go up and up at a higher rate. It's madness. Voters will often blame the government for things that aren't even their fault. So of course they're going to blame the government for things that are. The NHS waiting lists, of course they are. The only people this rhetoric appeals to are those who are already going to vote Tory anyway. If Labour get this chart through every letterbox in the country, or at least in target seats, it'll completely negate the Tories' attack line here. I mean, it's already poor. We've had NHS strikes for every year, and I've seen no polling evidence that the Tories are gaining any advantage with it. Like, the only explanation I can come up with is that they think this is a loss leader. They realise that actually, you know, it is hurting them, but they think that the money that they're saving on NHS pay can be used for tax cuts, and that somehow gets them more votes than they lose by destroying the NHS. But what good are a few pounds in tax cuts if you can't get treatment when you're ill or injured? It's not only a strategic error that the Tories are making. Like, I'm quite likely to discuss others before Christmas as well. But this is a really big one. Healthcare is a top issue. Even for Conservative voters who somehow think that immigration asylum is a bigger issue, it's still a top issue for them. And it's not like the government's plan lets them sacrifice this issue for the sake of more important ones. It's also worth considering something else. This is going to bite the Tories long term. The worse they leave the waiting list when Labour in power, the more of a difference will be visible when this chart extends to the next Labour government. Look at it now. Then imagine what it's going to look like after, say, 5, 6, 7 years of a Labour government. There'll be some Tories who benefit from it, sure, small number. Because Labour have said that they're getting that waiting list down and they're going to use everything, including private capacity, to do so. Some have complained about this, confusing it with privatisation. It's not privatisation. Labour are committed to further nationalising the NHS. That's clear. That's going to be in the manifesto. This is using private capacity purely to get those waiting lists down as quickly as possible. Waiting lists that should not exist in those numbers. It's both a moral and an economic imperative to do so. But it will mean some Tories with business interests in private healthcare will make a few quid out of it, right? But it will make the waiting list chart look particularly compelling in a few years' time. Come the following election in 2028 or 2029, whenever it is, there really will be no doubt as to which party deals with healthcare properly, because then this chart will be extended. It'll be Tory waiting list, up, Labour, down. Tories, up, Labour, down. It will be as clear as you like. If the Tories want to come back to power anytime soon, it would be in their interest to make sure that that falling waiting list happens on their watch. And then claim that the fact that it carries on falling under Labour is because, oh, actually, Labour have just carried on what we started, right? It's all ours, we started it, yeah? But they're not doing that because Tories these days don't even care about Tories. They're screwing themselves over for the coming election and for the ones after that as well. But there we are. Those are my thoughts. Let me know yours in the comments below. Hope you found the video interesting. If you did, please click the like button. And if you'd like to support the channel further, the join button for memberships. And until next time, I'll see you later.